Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is all about software. So let's go to Learning Objectives, page 162 in your book. 162 basically talks about identify and briefly describe the functions of two different major categories of software. Yep. Outline the role of the operating system. Yep, that'd be good. Discuss how application software can support three different spheres of influence. That's a good term. Identify three basic approaches to acquiring software. And we're going to spend an awful lot of time on this part, so pay attention. Outline the overall evolution and importance of programming languages. Not so much. Identify several key software issues and trends. Yep, that'd be good to do. Let's talk about the gold section. The gold section is, why do I have to learn this? And essentially, your role as some office manager somewhere, you're going to be touching software. I mean, it's just going to happen. And there's a lot of things you kind of sort of need to know about how software is acquired. How much does it cost? For example, there's one of the things in here that basically talks about that software typically is more expensive than the hardware. And let's say you didn't know that, and your people were coming to you complaining, well, we need to get some upgrade of this software, and you go, geez, this costs a fortune. Well, if you weren't aware that the software costs more than a hard drive, you might be thinking, oh, you guys are nuts, go back, work with the old system. But now that you know that that's not at all unusual. So that's a good reason for learning this chapter, is so, one, you know what to expect, and second, you won't be fooled by some lazy salesman who comes in and tries to sell you a bill of goods. Okay, so let's continue here. They start off with some terms, and the terms are kind of weird. The definition of a computer program is a sequence of instructions for computers. Jeez, okay, that's kind of silly. But I think everyone knows what a computer program is. Basically it's that little goofy icon you click on and makes things run, right? So I think everyone kind of gets that. Let's talk about documentation for a minute, because this is kind of different. In my way of thinking, there's three different levels of documentation. There's user level documentation, that's to provide day-to-day operation, like how do I get this thing to print, that kind of stuff. There's some administrator instructions, like how do I install this in a network environment. And then there's some programmer instructions. So there's three different levels of instruction. If you ever tried to cram them all together into a single set of instructions, you'd probably be in bad shape. So for example, I have an example out here. Here's a set of documentation. It's all in one PDF file, but that's not really relevant. This is a setup and configuration guide. This is for, like, if you had 100 people in your office and you had like 2 administrators, well, only 2 people are going to be able to follow these instructions, okay? Nobody else is going to be able to do it. So, compiling the source code, that's not for everyone. How to do, edit the configuration files and all the rest of that. Setting up database and deploying it and all that. What do you have to do to maintain it? These are all instructions for like 2 people out of your entire office. Down here is the user's guide, and this is all about, how do I do, and it has, pretty pictures and, icons and screenshots and telling you how to do stuff, each one of the menus and what all they mean, that kind of stuff. So don't try to cram them all together. I don't have an example of the third category of internal programmer to programmer kind of thinking, but that's okay. All right, so let's continue. Another thing we need to kind of sort of talk about is, whenever you're buying software, you need to be aware of what computer platform that you have. It used to be, the computer platform was very, very important. If you told somebody you had a Dell computer or an HP or whatever, they could automatically infer that you were running Windows, and so you just buy the Windows software and you're good to go. That's not the case anymore, because now you need to know, well, am I running, Windows 7, or am I running Windows 10? Is it a 64-bit? Is it 32-bit? Am I running, an Apple? I mean, just because I have a Dell doesn't mean I'm not running, Linux on the machine, or perhaps even Chrome OS on a small laptop. I mean, Dell sells machines that have Windows and Chrome and Linux, so you have to ask a little bit more whenever you're buying software. I have seen people, in fact, if you go look at the reviews for Chromebook, it's a small laptop, you'll get people who say, well, I bought this thing because it was cheap, but it won't run my my games. It's like, no, because that's the wrong platform. Chrome OS is not the same as Windows, and you can't buy a Windows game and install it on Chrome OS. Okay. So, yes, the computer platform is kind of sort of important. Okay, the next thing to talk about is two different categories of software. The system software, the stuff that's behind the scenes that you rarely ever see, and then the application software is the stuff that you do see. Okay, so let's continue. So they start talking about application software. Now, I think everyone kind of sort of knows what application software is. This is the stuff that's specifically designed for you, okay? The way I describe application software is it's software that's designed to solve a business problem, solve your problem, not to serve itself. So, for example, a print driver on your machine is designed to solve an internal problem of connecting my computer to my printer. It doesn't do me anything. It's for its own internal use. Okay, so application software consists of programs that help users solve particular computing for users. So application software is all about users. Cool. Okay. All right. And I'm going to skip through this because some of this stuff you guys kind of already know. At least I would hope you do. One of the things they talk about is the spheres of influence. So they break them up into personal, which means just... Come on, machine. There we go. Personal, which means, just one person on a machine. Work group, which means I've got like a network environment and 2 or 3 people are using the same system. And then enterprise is for accounts payable, where the entire organization is running this thing. Okay, so comparing system software and application software. So using those 2 categories and these 3 spheres of influence, let's look at the intersection of these 5 things. So in the personal space, system software would be like, your tablet, your computer, that kind of stuff. In a work group environment, it would be like the network operating. Then, by the way, in the old days, you could actually buy a separate network operating system. Now, practically no one does that. The network parts are just baked into the operating system. So if you went with Linux or you went with Mac OS or you went with Windows, the networking stuff's all baked in. You don't have to go buy something else for a network operating system. And then over here, I've got some giant mainframe somewhere running mainframe software. Okay, in the application part, word processing, spreadsheets, you know what I'm talking about. Work group would be like email and collaboration and scheduling, those kind of things. SharePoint services, that kind of stuff. And over here, general ledgers and data entry and payroll, those kinds of things. Okay. So those are the spheres of influence. Okay. So one of the things that's kind of weird is they start talking about, now system software. And they talk about there's 3 types of systems. There's operating systems, utility program, and middleware. So of the 3 different types. And so the first one they talk about is the operating system. So this is a good that's one of those goofy drag and drops. Okay. Well, in the book, this is a good thing because it basically tells you that the user is insulated from the operating system by lots and lots and lots of layers of stuff. Basically, you have to go through, a user interface, and then you have to go through, an application programming, and then you have to go through operating system and have to go through drivers. So when it comes time for you to get down to the hard drive, you've gone through layer after layer after layer after layer. And the takeaway of this isn't to memorize what those layers are. The takeaway for this is that users don't directly touch the hardware in any modern system. It's just not the way it works. Okay. So here's some things here that these categories. So a single computer with a single user. Okay, so this is typically like Microsoft Windows, just the stuff you install. Maybe Mac OS. So let's say I went and got an iPad. Okay, The iPad typically doesn't have like a login screen. Okay, they kind of assume that you're kind of in a safe environment and that it's a personal machine. So if there's 3 people in the office, everyone has their own iPad, and you don't pass it around from person to person. So there's no real need for me to have like a login. Okay, that was their thinking. Then you have a single computer with multiple people logging into it. Well, now I have to have a login kind of a thing. And here they talk about simultaneous users. So what happens if I have a single machine, but I could have 2 people logged in at the same time? So most operating systems will allow you to have some degree of multi-user. And it really depends on what flavor of the operating system you have. For example, if I have Windows 7 or 8, 8.1 or 10, typically if I have the Pro edition, I can have 2 people logged in at the same time and working. I'm not talking about having users that are like in the background but someone else logged in. But if I wanted to get 5 people concurrently running at the same time, I'd have to have a Windows Server product. Okay, multiple computers with multiple. This is where I have a server farm. I have like 5 or 6 servers. They're all kind of linked together, and I've got 100 employees, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, special purpose guys, where, whatever it is. It could be a supercomputer in the basement doing something or whatever. They also have categories for specialized for like doing a GPS unit or some sort of embedded things like the new thermostats and things of that nature. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is the roles. What are the roles of an operating system? So typically, here's what operating systems do for a living. Okay, what do they do for a living? Well, they control the hardware, because remember now you can't directly talk to the hardware. They provide that user interface. Now, a lot of people, since this is the only thing that they see, they actually call that the operating system. They go, so in the Windows world, they look at like a process called Explorer, and they go, well, that's the operating system. It's like, well, that's the user interface to the operating system, but that ain't really the operating system. Provides a degree of hardware independence. That's pretty cool. That means I could swap out my graphics card or my hard drive or my processor, and the system will still run. Managing memory, managing tasks, providing network capability, controlling access to system resources. This is important. I want my operating system to be able to say, wait a minute, you're not Bob, so therefore you can't see Bob's files. Only Bob can see Bob's files. And then just managing files, copying, deleting, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so I mentioned the user interface thing. So on page 169, they go in a little bit more detail about what the user interface looks like. So yes, in the old days, they had a command line interface. You just had a text, and you typed commands on the keyboard, and you hit return, and it did whatever the heck you wanted it to do. And that worked pretty well. And then they realized, Apple was kind of the first to commercialize the idea of having a graphical user interface. So graphical user, and it's pronounced GUI, G-U-I, GUI. It's kind of silly. So a graphical user interface is a lot easier for most people rather than popping out to the command prompt. So here's a good Trivial Pursuit question for you. Are there systems out there that still just use the command prompt and don't have a graphical user interface? I mean, are those things still around? The answer is yes. Yes, when you install Windows Server, it's going to come up and ask you, do you want just the bare bones minimum operating system, or do you want the full-blown user interface? You get a choice. And if you said no, well, then you don't get a GUI. All you get is a command line. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.